of benfotiamine.net Incorporated, a vitamin supplement company that provides an alternative to the pain of neuropathy, a nerve disorder. Benfotiamine makes an extraordinary difference, especially for diabetics and their families. Products and educational info can be found at www.benfocomplete.com. And I'll add this with her other information tonight. Her background is diverse, from working as a paralegal and bank branch manager to being a U.S. Air Force officer, serving as an intelligence officer at the Pentagon, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and in Wiesbaden, Germany. Debbie is just like you, a woman on a mission to live an authentic, joyful life as the woman with the smile rather than behind it. Debbie was the 2017 California Women's Conference Speak Off winner and is available for speaking of engagements. Well, welcome, Debbie. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. This is an honor to be here.
Good. So through some tragedy, it sounds, you came to this point in your life. How did this all come about?
Well, it started, I was married for 26 years, and I have 4 wonderful children. It started about 7 years ago when I got the call from my son and said, "Mom, Dad just died. I'm coming home to take care of everything." And that moment was extraordinary for all of us because Lou had not been sick. He was traveling. He had a race car, and he had taken it to the west coast of Florida to get it tuned up for a race down in Miami. And he woke up, and he left on Wednesday. I said goodbye like you normally do, with give him a hug and a kiss and a pat on the back and say, see you tomorrow. And he got over there, and the next morning woke up and went to the man beside him at breakfast and said, "Here are my car keys. There's my truck. Please put my stuff in the car. Call 911. I'm having a heart attack." And he was dead within a half an hour. He'd not been sick. He did have diabetes, which was under control. And he had a strong heart, but he ended up having a heart attack. So it was one of those things that threw me into being a single mom of 4. And my oldest kids were gone. The oldest was 23. The youngest was 15. And, I had the youngest home. So it changed our lives completely, as you can imagine. But the hardest thing for me was that Lou owned a company that he ran. I at the time was working as a treasurer for the school district in Palm Beach. And he ran a family business, which was paying the bills. I was only working to have medical insurance. And at that moment, I was in charge of the business, and I really hadn't run it ever. I didn't know much about it other than packing the packages for our customers. But fortunately, he had a lot of good friends and good customers, good suppliers that knew a lot about what he did. And they sat down with me day after day after day and gave me little tidbits on what to do, because he didn't write down anything. He had not left an operating manual or anything for me. So I was thrown into running the business, which was probably good because it kept me busy. I would go to school in the morning at 6 o'clock, work until about 1, go swimming, and then I would come home and I would work the business from, say, 2 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning, trying to figure out how to keep things going from ordering and supplying to, because I ran out once, and you never want to do that when you have a company that provides a supplement or provides a product for a customer that they depend on. You never want to run out. And I did that once and learned a big lesson about how not to do that. So anyway, I would work and work and work, and I realized it was because I didn't want to go to bed at night, because for the first time in 26 years, I was really alone. I was alone in bed, and I was sad in my thoughts, and I was probably angry for a while that he died, and not that he had anything to do with it, but you just have all those emotions of being left alone suddenly. And friends of mine, after about 6 months, could see that I was just running on this adrenaline and extra energy and just not taking very good care of myself, but keeping things going. I kind of put up that smile and said, I'm fine, because I was strong, I was smart, I was well-trained, and I was supposed to do that. But inside, I was probably falling apart quite a lot. And again, I didn't seek any therapy. I was busy, and I felt like I was okay. I was going to be okay. And my friend said, you need a life. You need to start getting out. You need to start dating. You need to start doing something other than work. Well, I laughed at that because I really didn't like dating when I was young. And I surely didn't want to do it at 52. And I didn't drink. I didn't really go to bars or go to things like that. And so I was like, how am I going to find a gentleman that I wanted to date if I was only working at home and in the school? So my best friend said, well, try online dating. It's safe. You can do it from home. You can sort of, stalk. You can see who's out there without actually having to meet them. And I did that, and I looked at many, many sites, but I found one that was a faith-based online dating site, and I thought it would be safe. And I dipped my toe, and I put my profile out there, again, wanting to be perfect. I didn't have any help. I didn't have anybody looking at it, but I figured I had to be careful because I had 4 children, and some people could have considered that a lot of baggage. I had a company. I had all these things that I wanted to put into a package to look good. And I put out my best pictures and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I found out a lot about what you should and shouldn't do with online dating after the fact. But I put it out there, and I was astonished at what was coming back at me. I was not terribly impressed with the men that were out between 50 and, say, 65. And for the most part, they couldn't write well, and the pictures it just wasn't what I had expected until I was contacted by a very good-looking man, a widower from London. And he was an independent businessman and was traveling the world. And he wrote to me, I wrote back, and we started this incredible friendship, which turned into an online relationship, as best you can have an online relationship. And it went on for 2 years. And he became part of my family. I became his. We wrote every day. It was extraordinary. For me, it was therapy. That's why I felt I didn't need a therapist, because I was able to write everything that I needed to tell him, write it down, because I knew I couldn't ever explain in person or articulate verbally what I was feeling. I was very private, and I had never really told people how I felt all my life. But writing it down was therapy to me. I loved writing. And I also kept everything in a journal. So I would take our conversations, and I had an online journal, and I would cut and paste and put it in my journal thinking, this is great family history. My kids will have a story about how Eric and I met, and it was wonderful. I had 4,000 pages of journaling that I also printed. I have 5 printed books. And it went on for, like I said, almost 2 years. And again, the big aha moment here was because my heart was leaving my head at that point, and I had someone that was listening to me and filling up the hole that I had, because I didn't want contention when I was married. I didn't like I wasn't very good at fighting and speaking up, really, although I was very independent. But Lou was a big guy. He was a big personality. He was big in spirit, big in physical. And I just sort of stuffed everything and got busy. I was very good at being busy. And I realized later on, actually just recently, that I had this huge hole in me that felt like it hadn't been listened to all those years. And when I got involved with Eric, because I wrote to him and he wrote back, little by little, he was filling up that hole. And it was really, it changed me in such good ways. But it also, I think, allowed me to not see some red flags, or as I call them, pink and yellow flags, that might have said, this isn't quite right, Deb. And I think a lot of us are very much a giver. We're givers as far as being mothers and wives, and we just want to help. And throughout that whole time, because I own a company, I was seeing what Eric was doing with his business, and when he needed help, I helped him. I helped him financially, which I'm one of those damn Yankees, and I never really give money away to anybody except for church and for good causes. But I felt because he had become part of my family that I was helping him so that he would finish his job and come home to me, and we'd be together. And that was well and good until September 10th, 2012, when he came online and he said, Deb, how do you feel about forgiveness? And I put on my scripture hat, my spiritual hat, and I just started blasting went to my scriptures. I went to any book that I had that might address that subject, and we talked for hours. And later on, we got disconnected, and he came back and he said, do you understand, why I asked you that question? I'm like, no, did I do something wrong? Why, are you okay? And he said, I have something to confess to you. And at that moment, I didn't know what to say. And he said, Deb, I have to confess that this has all been a lie. This has all been a scam. And I'm sitting here looking at a picture. Again, we're not live. We're just Yahoo chatting. Mm-hmm. And I said, Eric, you're lying. What is wrong? You must be ill. I said, you have to prove to me what you're saying is true. And he, for the first time in 2 years, he said, look, on Yahoo Chat, there's a little camera in the corner of the screen, and I'm going to come on live. And that's the first time he's ever told me that he was able to come on live, because he was in Malaysia, he was in India, he was in Hong Kong, all these places around the Far East. And he always told me he couldn't come on live. And when he said, open up this little camera on Yahoo Chat, I did that, thinking that I was going to see, my tall, handsome man from London, and the screen popped up, and there's this dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-haired, dark-skinned young man smiling at me, and I'm looking at him going, who are you? And that was Joseph, not Eric. And Joseph was from Nigeria and not from London. And I died. Oh my gosh. In an instant, I don't know how your brain or your heart can do it, but that 2-year of love all of a sudden was gone. And I'm sitting here thinking, how in the world could this have happened? What am I going to do? And he's looking at me smiling, going, can we keep this going? And I'm like, are you out of your mind? And he said, no. He says, I said, at that point, of course I can't keep it going. And he said, is it because I'm black? And I'm like, and from Nigeria. And I said, well, thinking to myself, maybe, but no, not really. I said, Eric, or whatever your name is, I said, you've lied to me for 2 years, and you've taken over $1 million from me. Now, I didn't have $1 million to give, but over those years, I found it, like we all would, somehow. Retirement funds, or I used my company, I kind of floated money until I got it back, and thinking that I was helping him so that he could finish the job and come home to me. And somehow I had my phone right beside me, and I was able to take a picture of him. It's the only picture I have of the real person. And actually, I wrote a book, and it's in my book. It's amazing, because he's sitting there with this big smile on his face, and I'm like, why did you do this? First off, why did you confess? Because scammers never confess. And he had actually fallen in love with me as a person, because he got to know me over 2 years, knew every part of me, and he had fallen in love with that. And I don't know if he had a spiritual awakening or something happened to him where he felt like he couldn't scam me anymore. And all I can say is that I'm grateful that he told me, because he could have walked away. He could have just stopped communicating, and it would have been worse than the day that Lou died, because I was part of it. I was such a willing part of the whole 2 years. And now I was an Air Force officer, I was a banker, and all those former jobs I'd had, my brain started going, what do I do to catch him? And you watch a lot of TV thinking the FBI or someone can find him. And I kept communicating with him for 2 or 3 months, thinking that, I've got a lot of information on him. If I can just keep him live, that maybe the authorities can help me. So I called my parents, because unfortunately, the hardest thing for me, the worst thing for me, is that I had gotten my mom and dad involved financially. And I thought that, together we could give Eric some money, he would pay them back with great interest and whatever, and we would be super. So my mom and dad came over, because they were here with me when Lou died, and they've been my greatest supporters. We went to the FBI with my 4,000 pages of journal and my 3-inch binder of transactions from the bank. And the FBI looked at me, they were just flabbergasted by how much documentation I had. And they're like, we're really sorry, but there's nothing we can do for you. Unless you get him to the United States, We can't help you. And at that moment, I just shut down. I didn't tell anybody other than my mother and dad. I didn't tell my children. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell anybody what happened. I was mortified, as you can imagine. You know, with the background I had, I never should have been scammed. But through the years, I realized that my heart was really ruling my head. And that's the most dangerous thing when you've been either widowed suddenly or divorced, or there's something that's happened that has left you very vulnerable. And these guys, which they actually call them the Yaku boys, they are very skilled at slowly putting themselves into your life over time. Not 2 years. Typically, it doesn't take 2 years. But again, I had never anticipated someone was going to scam me. Ever. No one's lied to me, especially for 2 years, you know? And it just rocked my insides. It rocked my trust in humanity, which is so sad because I love people and I trust people. And I never, ever thought that someone could deceive me so intensely for such a long period of time. But the FBI turned around and said, well, you're a victim. You know, these guys are manipulative and they do it to millions of people. And here's an interesting fact. They said in Palm Beach County, of course you live here, they said in Palm Beach, more men get scammed for over $1 million than women. And I thought that was very interesting. And I also realized that probably not one man would ever tell the story. Ever. You know, I mean, it took me years to tell it. And so I was able to tell that fact the other day. I was speaking about this, and I told the people in Palm Beach that happened. And I've been so well received by people, because initially I was scared because I thought, oh, people are going to think you were stupid or that you were, you know, just such a pushover. And I realized that it doesn't matter how educated you are, how wealthy or how whatever, that if you're in a position of vulnerability, you can be taken. And not just online, but financially, in business, with friends, with family members. Anything can put you in that position. And I've learned to have people around me that I love and trust, that I listen to, because I wasn't listening. The people that were talking to me, my family members, my friends, I pushed them away. I didn't want to hear what they said. I remember telling my oldest son, don't tell me what to do. I'm the adult here and I can do what I want. And it changed our relationship, not for the good at that point. But when I finally came clean and I told my story, my oldest son just lost it, because I didn't tell him personally. He heard it from a radio show. His wife was listening to it. And he came on Skype that night and just blasted me anew. And it was the best thing that he could have done for me, because it really humbled me and made me realize that when my husband died, my son, who got the phone call, took on the mantle of protector. And I didn't allow him to protect me. And I felt so terrible. But I also was able to explain to him some things that had happened over my 26 years of marriage to his dad that he never really knew. And he was married at the time. So he understood more about how it could have happened. And I said, Chris, you know, we've learned so much from this moment on. Let's make sure that we talk, that we don't stuff things, that we don't hide things, that we really are adults and we talk. And I know it's hard because he's so much like me. He's very protective of his feelings. And I said, let's learn one thing, at least for each other, to be completely honest and get strong enough to speak up when we need to. And it changed our relationship for the good, and it was extraordinary. So it was a learning experience, and again, it took me years before I could talk about it. Because
how did that happen? How, you know, what made you decide that this is a story that needs to be told to other women, to other people?
I went to a speaker training called The Business of Speaking with the Women's Prosperity Network, which is a marvelous women's organization in Fort Lauderdale. I had joined that organization because I realized that being by myself, running my company, I was getting such a narrow vision of what was really happening. I needed people around me. I needed a team around me. And so I joined Women's Prosperity Network, and I went to their seminar called The Business of Speaking. I'd gone originally to talk about my company, but it was hard for me to really speak about the company because the passion of the business was Lou's. It was his company. He had diabetes. The product worked for him, and it was his life. For me, it's like I kind of just got thrown into it, and I was trying to find the passion, but I couldn't. Exactly. And at lunch, I was sitting with a girlfriend, and she mentioned online dating, and I guess I rolled my eyes at what she was saying. And she said, "What's the story behind that?" And I told her very quietly. Again, I was embarrassed. And she looked at me and she said, "You have got to tell that story. My mother was taken for $80,000. Another friend overheard the story. She'd gotten into a Ponzi scheme twice. Another friend had been dating a man for over a year in person, and it turned out he was with someone else in another city also." So they're like, "You've got to tell your story so that people understand that we get scammed, but the only way you're going to move on is to talk about it so that you can heal and understand that you're not alone." And at that moment in my speaker training, that was on Friday or Thursday, I think it was a 3-day thing, so it was the first day. The next 2 days, I worked on speaking about my story. And at the end, I had to give a close, and it was, "Well, join me at a VIP dinner and the exclusive premiere of The Woman Behind the Smile movie." And they all said, "When can we buy the tickets?" And I laughed, and I said, "I just made that up, you guys." They said, "No, someday this story will be a movie. You've got to write your book, get it out, and you can help so many men and women come out from behind their stories so that they can move on in a very honest way." And that's why I did it. And honestly, I was challenged to write a book, which I did. I had to get it done by October because I was speaking on a cruise with Sharon Frame, who's also a member, called the Women's Empowerment Powership Cruise. And that was my goal. Get the book done so that you can speak on the cruise. And the cruise was the very first time that I did it in person and really shared my story. And the most marvelous part was that my mom was there with me. It was her 82nd birthday, and I took her on the cruise with me. And it was the first time she'd heard some stories of things that had happened in my life that, again, I hid because I wanted to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect friend. And I never was completely honest with some of the things that had happened. Not that they were bad, but they shaped the way I was living and the way I felt about things. And it was liberating to write my story, and even more empowering to speak about what happened, because now, obviously, at the moment I found out about the scam, I was emotionally able to separate from what happened with the reality. The reality was terrible, but I took my power back. I became victorious. I didn't want to be that victim. And by speaking up and just allowing one other woman or one other man to tell me their story, and just, you can see the burden just rise off their shoulders. And for me, that's just marvelous. It's just the most extraordinary experience to be alongside someone when they release their hidden stories.
Yeah, it must really, I can see where holding it in would not be a healthy thing.
No.
And feeling guilty about it, like it was your fault. Obviously, it's not. Though sometimes we let ourselves get into these situations, but at the same time, people are scammed every single day.
Every day. Every day. And the hardest person to forgive is yourself. And although it was easy, quote unquote, for me to forgive Eric or Joseph or whoever it is, I realized that I needed to forgive myself for being taken in, because otherwise I would regret it to today. That money, I realized too that there's no pockets in your last suit. You can't take the money with you. So I can't bemoan that I don't have it, although it would be nice to help with the company, and now I have grandchildren. But it's okay. I never was without the roof over my head. I never went without a meal. I was protected in that way. But I feel now that it's part of me, it's part of my purpose in life, is to speak about what happened. So hopefully one other person asked me the other day, is there something we could have said to you or done for you that would have kept you from doing what you did? And probably not. Because I knew my way around banking. I was too smart for my own good, honestly, because I would look at things and try to analyze them, and then I would justify why they weren't really working out the way they were. And then when I did an interview one time, and a woman from Indiana said, Deb, God let this happen to you, or it happened to you because he knew that one day you would be strong enough to put it behind you and help other people by talking about your story. And I feel that that's what's happened, is I have the courage now to really speak up, speak from my heart, be vulnerable about it, and just open up and say, it happens. Scams happen, fraud happens, deceit happens. And unfortunately, there's a lot of evil out there, and it's attacking those of us that are trying to be good. But we can't hide our goodness, because then it'll take over. And it's just one of those things now. I don't want to feel ashamed of what I did, because it was done to me, even though I was a willing part of it. But it's time to stand up. And for me, it was standing up in my power. And that's kind of become my mantra, is stand up in your power and speak up and let your story help someone else. And I've met some marvelous people that have told their stories. And when I hear their stories, I feel they're so much worse than mine were. You know, my friends that have been abused as kids, I didn't know those stories until I read their books. And it's made me so much more empathetic to other people that have horrific stories, some tragic stories, but they've overcome. And that's the beauty, is when you overcome those things that have been holding you back for a long time. So it's been a very interesting experience. But one that has fundamentally changed me for the good, because I found my voice again. I lost it, you know, and I think any of us that have been married for a long time sometimes take the back seat to the kids, to the husband, to the parents. And I just was with my neighbor who lost her husband a couple days ago, and we were talking about this, and she said, you know what? I don't know who I am anymore. And I felt that way when Lou died. And one of his friends came to me and said, so who are you now? And I sat there going, I've been a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister. I don't know who I am. Well, 7 years later, I know who I am now. And I am so grateful for the things that have happened, because I've taken a hold of them with a very powerful, with powerful prayer and a lot of loving help from friends and family members. Great support. And that's what you really need, to find someone you trust and be willing to open up and stand up for what you believe in, and stand up for what's happened to you, and just own it and move on. It's very liberating.
I can believe it is. And what a great story. And I like that from that you developed a passion to spread this word, to tell other people that you don't have to hide or be ashamed because of things that happened to you. So, are you dating now?
Actually, that's the happy part of it. I remarried a year ago.
Excellent.
I met a wonderful man, and I met him through friends, and one of the friends was a matchmaker, but he's marvelous. And honestly, it was so funny that the second date we had, we were at Denny's, and he told me something about him that his friend said, don't tell her, but he decided to be honest. And I said, thank you so much. Now, with that, let me tell you my story. And I figured if he could hang with me after that, bless his heart. And I never dated anybody after that date. And we dated for 3 years, and we got married a year ago. And he has been such a great supporter of me coming out and telling my story, because he says he sees me getting stronger every time I tell it. And it's marvelous. And he's a sweetheart. And it was extraordinary to find love a second time, especially in my mid-50s. So there's hope out there. And so many of my friends want me to clone him, because he's a darling man.
Excellent.
Yeah. And between us, he had 28 years of marriage. I had 26. So we learned a lot of things what not to do the second time around. And we are very conscious of being very open with each other. And We hold hands when we go for a walk. We sit together and hold hands when we watch TV. I mean, things that my heart needed, and I didn't do that for many of the years I was married. And so we make a conscious choice to really take care of each other now, and it's extraordinary. I'm so happy. I mean, I'm at a point now where I think I'm probably happier today with everything in my life than I've really ever been, and it's a marvelous place to be. I'm very grateful.
Good for you. So, do you think there'll be another book coming out?
I'm sure there is, and it's they're not necessarily. I got the online dating thing out, but some things have happened, particularly with my youngest son, who was 15 when his dad died, and has made some interesting choices. And there's some addiction issues that we've had to deal with the last few years. And part of me wants to come out and talk about that now. I feel that's a subject that, and I was hearing today that one of my neighbor's 18-year-old daughters just died of a heroin overdose. I mean, there's something that people look at us and think, oh, there's things like that couldn't possibly happen to her children or to her family. Again, we put up that persona of perfection. And I want people to realize that things like that happen to everybody. And again, if you talk about it, your friends will say, well, I had that happen in my family too, or so-and-so is having that happen. And you don't want to share it until you realize that there's someone else that you love and trust that's going through the same thing. And it encourages me when I talk with other parents that are going through it, because they educate me on what to expect. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't know about those things. And I was so naive and enabling in so many ways. And I think that's the next thing, that he and I will write a book together about some of the experiences he's gone through. I'm going to write it from a parent point of view. He's going to write it from his point of view, and we'll put it together. I just feel like that's a mission for him when he's ready to do so. I'm ready today. I mean, I'm ready to.
We look forward to it.
Thank you.
So, as you know, at the end of the day, I will be sending out to all our viewers the free gift from each of our speakers. And so, do you want to tell us about yours?
Well, I believe that I offered up my book, and I also have a journal that I have, because for me, journaling is so, it's important. And I don't do it all the time, but I did when I went through the 2 years. I wrote every day. And I encourage people just to write down their thoughts, even if we say, I can't journal, even if it's a letter to yourself or a letter to a child or a grandchild, telling them how you feel, because one day that'll be an important part of their life, seeing it in your writing and seeing your feelings. So I do have a journal, and I have a copy of my book.
Excellent, excellent. So we'll be sending out all that information. And Deb, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you. And we look forward to more conversations, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.